Yesterday, Hall of Famer Shaquille O'Neal suggested in his podcast that the Los Angeles Clippers trade Paul George this offseason in search of more consistent complementary pieces to Kawhi Leonard. His reasoning was that the Clippers already have their man in Kawhi Leonard, but he's been deferring to someone who thinks he's a man in Paul George. It seems like quite the overreaction, given the fact the Clippers only have one season together under their belts. But it's also quite obvious the front office is feeling the pressure to win now, with their recent decision to fire well-respected head coach throughout the league, Doc Rivers. The franchise can't afford to have another disappointing postseason, being that both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George will be eligible to opt out this summer to become unrestricted free agents and potentially walk away with nothing in return. The more thought that was put into teams that could potentially make a quality offer for Paul George's services, that most importantly would be mutually beneficial for both teams, the clearer it became the perfect trade partners for Paul George's services would be the Golden State Warriors. This would be under a circumstance the Clippers front office is still skeptical about the team's chemistry and the likelihood of George or Kawhi Leonard re-signing long-term. So here are 3 quick trade packages the Clippers could heavily consider in the event that Paul George is actually put on the trade block this offseason. At the end of the video, let me know what you guys think about these offers, which ones are worth considering and which ones are not. The first trade proposal on this list includes Andrew Wiggins and the number 2 overall pick of this year's draft in exchange for Paul George's expiring 1-year contract that becomes a player option next summer. It'll be more than likely George opts into his player option with his new star-studded team, playing alongside the Splash Brothers Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson. So at the minimum, the Warriors would have him for 2 seasons with the possibility of renegotiating a long-term contract if everything works out. This will hands down be Paul George's greatest chance to win a ring, as he'd be primed for a highly productive season to silence his critics. Like during Kevin Durant's stint, Paul George should be seeing some of the easiest looks of his entire career, given all the attention and spacing Curry and Thompson draws. A core of Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Paul George, Draymond Green, and a center using the mid-level exception, whether it be Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, Dwight Howard, or Hassan Whiteside, would immediately catapult the Warriors as a top 3 favorite to win it all next season and return to their championship dynasty ways for the foreseeable future. It's a trade that works out for both parties because the Clipper front office mitigates the risk of Paul George walking away for nothing in return, which will likely happen if he continues to struggle in the postseason with the Clippers again. Jerry West would be showing a high level of commitment to building a competitive playoff team around Kawhi Leonard in hopes that he reciprocates those same feelings by staying with the organization long term. As for what the Clippers get in return for parting ways with their two-way superstar, they get a highly talented Andrew Wiggins who has all the makeups to be an elite two-way wing himself, and a 2nd overall pick in this year's draft to address their point guard need or center position. 6 years into the league, Wiggins is still not the two-way star he was supposed to be, but the reality is that he's only 25 years old and we've yet to see the best of him. You also need to honestly ask, who was Andrew Wiggins supposed to learn from when playing for such a lowly organization like the Minnesota Timberwolves? Coming into the league, the team severely lacked quality veterans to show him the ropes until Jimmy Butler arrived, and we all know that Butler's teaching method is not exactly everyone's cup of tea. Under an organization where his development could be customized around his quiet, non-confrontational nature, and where he has a clear blueprint to model after, that's when we could see Wiggins flourish as a two-way star he was supposed to be. Who better to do that with than Clippers Jerry West, one of the best basketball minds in the game, who has been a part of all-time great talents developing over the years with the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors, and on top of that, Kawhi Leonard is a perfect star for Wiggins to imitate given their similar personalities, two-way potential as 25-year-olds, and their gradual development over the first 5 years of their careers. Even though the sample size is small, just look at how Wiggins immediately showed his two-way potential in his 12 games playing under Steve Kerr. In the least minutes per game of his entire career, Wiggins showed the most well-rounded game we've seen of him, averaging over 19 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, to go along with a highly impressive 1.3 steals and 1.4 blocks per game. In just 12 games of getting acclimated with the Warriors, his impact was felt all over the court as soon as he arrived, and most importantly, he was able to do so in a very efficient manner. So again, we have yet to see the best of Andrew Wiggins, but he just needs the right mentors. With this blockbuster trade, the Clippers will be getting 2 highly talented pieces in Andrew Wiggins and a number 2 overall pick to pair alongside Kawhi Leonard long-term for at least the next 3 years. That gives Jerry West quality assets to hold on to in case more roster changes are needed down the line, as opposed to rolling the dice if Paul George re-signs long-term, despite his reputation taking a hit since becoming a Clipper. The Clippers would be rolling the dice that Wiggins could finally break out of his shell to develop into a quality number 2 option behind Kawhi Leonard. Or hopefully that number 2 option could also be that number 2 overall pick. Just because Kawhi Leonard reportedly secretly put in a request for a point guard, I'll use LaMelo Ball as an example, who should be available at the number 2 overall pick. If the Clippers took 6'8" point guard LaMelo Ball, it would alleviate some of the pressure the Clippers are feeling to win immediately, as they'd be forced to watch the development of Ball over the next 2-3 years. How Kawhi Leonard would feel about the idea of not going all in next season is unknown, but the future of the organization is definitely brighter long term, with hypothetically a Kawhi Leonard, improving Andrew Wiggins, star talent LaMelo Ball on top of their existing core of Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Patrick Beverley, and Marcus Morris. With this trade, it buys the organization more time, as opposed to our current circumstances of title or bust next season. For the second and third trade proposal on this list, I'm going to just quickly go over them, because they're slight modifications of the first one. So at number 2, we have the Golden State Warriors shipping out Draymond Green along with the number 2 overall pick instead. This would probably mark the first of a series of moves the Warriors would have to follow up with, given the fact that Paul George and Andrew Wiggins would overlap at the small forward position. That's unless Steve Kerr decides to go small and put George at the 4. Like stated before, adding Paul George to the mix of Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson brings many similarities to the Warriors' championship dynasty days with Kevin Durant. The biggest difference in this case is that the Clippers get Draymond Green to be that much needed locker room guy who holds everyone accountable. That'll hold true with whoever Jerry West selects with the number 2 overall pick, whether that be LaMelo Ball, James Wiseman, or maybe even Anthony Edwards. Rolling with the LaMelo Ball example again, Jerry West and the Los Angeles Clippers would be running the exact same playbooks they had developed with Draymond Green and Stephen Curry back in Golden State, but this time with Draymond Green and LaMelo Ball. Kawhi Leonard would have his reported request granted, with not only one high potential point guard in LaMelo Ball, but a point forward as well in Draymond Green. Leonard and Green would form a nightmare defensive duo, and their personalities make for a perfect balance off the court. Coach Tyronn Lue recognizes the team is in much need of a glue guy to huddle this team together so they could reach the maximum of their potential, and that's exactly what Green had done in his time with the Warriors. Finally, at number 3, I have Paul George being sent to the Golden State Warriors in a deal that doesn't include the number 2 pick, should the Warriors find a prospect they really like. That deal revolves around Paul George along with a sign and trade of Marcus Morris for Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green. The Golden State Warriors get to keep their second overall pick to draft a James Wiseman or whoever it may be, while upgrading Andrew Wiggins for Paul George and downgrading Draymond Green for Marcus Morris. While on the other hand, the Clippers get their locker room guy in Draymond Green, and a chance to roll the dice on Andrew Wiggins breaking out of his shell as stated before. If you're not a fan of this trade, the Clippers have plenty more assets that could be swapped in, and same could be said about the Golden State Warriors, which is why I made this video in the first place. So let me know down in the comments below, in the event that Paul George is actually put on the trade block this offseason, which team says no to these deals? In my eyes, these Blockbuster trades seem mutually beneficial, so I definitely want to hear your feedback, but that's it for the video. Take it easy guys.